Close your eyes and imagine the most lavish throne room ever constructed by human civilization. Now fill that image with the sharp bite of iron and burning resin hanging in the air. Past doors hammered over with sheets of gold, sounds drift through thick curtains that no palace should ever produce, the kind that makes seasoned guards fix their eyes on the floor and keep walking without asking questions. Somewhere deep inside, animals bred to serve royalty are being fed things that were breathing not long ago. This is not some forgotten dungeon carved beneath a mountain fortress. This is the private wing of the Achaemenid dynasty, the living pulse of ancient Persia, where the man who declared himself king of kings and the woman who shared his bed treated human beings the way a bored child treats insects. Something to play with. Something to pull apart. Something to crush the moment the amusement runs dry. History handed down a clean version of Xerxes, a colossus who marched against Greece, blessed by the gods, unstoppable and eternal. That version was scrubbed, polished, stripped of everything inconvenient. What it quietly removes is the story of what happened after Greece broke him. After the great invasion crumbled and the legend shattered, Xerxes stopped looking outward. He retreated behind his own walls and constructed a private universe where no desire was too dark and no refusal was permitted to exist. Inside that universe, women were not human beings. Servants were not human beings. They were furniture. They were entertainment. They were disposable the moment they stopped being useful. And when his obsession locked onto the one target that should have been permanently off limits, the wife and daughter of his own brother Amestris, Xerxes did not withdraw. He tried to bury the scandal under gifts, promises, and enforced silence. What he actually did was place a loaded weapon directly into the hands of the most dangerous person in the entire empire. The woman sleeping beside him every single night. His queen, Amestris. Persian warlords dismantled their enemies with bronze and cavalry and fire. With siege towers and screaming soldiers. Amestris required none of that. Her weapon was something far more refined, terror delivered with perfect patience. She had figured out something most rulers never grasp in their entire lives. If you genuinely want to own someone, killing them is the laziest possible option. You dismantle them instead. You strip away their face, their body, their identity, every piece of what makes them recognizable, until the person standing in front of you is unrecognizable even to their own children. What we are going to move through right now, step by step and moment by moment, is exactly how one queen took her husband's obsession with his own niece and weaponized it into a cascade of violence so complete that an entire bloodline was effectively erased from memory. This is a story of golden halls soaked through with blood, of skin treated like fabric to be cut and reshaped at will, of an empire decaying from the inside out because the poison was being generated by the throne itself. Xerxes returned from Greece the way a god returns after being punched in the mouth. Just seasons earlier, he had ordered the ocean flogged with chains, stitched 2 continents together with floating bridges, and assembled more soldiers in one place than most civilizations had ever witnessed in their entire existence. Then Salamis happened. 480 BC. His warships fractured. Greek rams tore through Persian hulls while he observed from a golden chair positioned above the waterline, watching his entire mythology disintegrate beneath him. The man who departed Persia as a living deity arrived home as something significantly more dangerous, a humiliated king sitting atop unlimited power with nowhere to direct it. On the surface, nothing appeared to have changed. The treasury still overflowed. Gold still arrived from Egypt. Grain still poured in from Babylon. Governors in distant provinces still dropped to their knees when his name was spoken aloud. But inside the palace corridors, the air had quietly shifted. Courtiers who once competed furiously to celebrate his brilliance now changed topics the moment Greece was mentioned. Generals who had promised effortless conquest found sudden reasons to avoid the throne room entirely. Greek diplomats walked through Susa with a confidence that would have been fatal 2 years prior. Xerxes could feel the fractures spreading beneath him, but there was nothing left to conquer that could repair what Salamis had destroyed. So he did what broken rulers have always done throughout history. He stopped looking outward and turned his hunger for dominance inward, into the only kingdom he could still control without question. His own palace. And inside those walls, no one owned their own body. Every servant, every dancer, every eunuch breathed at the pleasure of the king. A gesture from his hand could mean reward, punishment, or a silent disappearance that no one would ever investigate. The harem functioned like a machine engineered to ensure he never encountered resistance. Women were selected, prepared, and cycled through his chambers like inventory moving through a warehouse. If he wanted a new face, advisors produced one. If interest faded, the girl was relocated to some forgotten corridor of the palace. The unspoken law was absolute, the king's appetite was sacred, and your body was raw material for it. There was one man who had earned genuine respect during the disaster in Greece. His name was Amestris, and he was Xerxes' own brother. Amestris had spoken honestly in war councils when everyone else was silent. He had challenged flawed strategy. He had attempted to anchor the campaign in reality when the rest of the room was too terrified to disagree with a living deity. Xerxes dismissed him at the time. But he never forgot. Back in Persia, Amestris held real authority, rank, deep respect, established roots at court. On the surface, the brothers coexisted without visible friction. That would not last. The first crack appeared at a royal banquet. One of those enormous feasts constructed to drown the memory of defeat in sheer excess. Tables buried under food, imported smoke filling the air from massive braziers, musicians playing until their hands stopped working. Xerxes reclined on his elevated couch, encircled by nobles and advisors. The women of the royal household occupied a separate area, but at gatherings of this scale the barriers thinned. Faces became visible. Voices carried across the room. That was when Xerxes noticed her, the wife of Amestris. Herodotus never preserved her name, and that silence communicates everything about her standing in the eyes of the men writing history. An unnamed woman sitting at the center of a catastrophe. She did not stand out because of jewelry or the way she was dressed. What separated her from every other person in that hall was something far more unsettling to a man like Xerxes: genuine composure. She moved through a court built entirely on performance and fear with a stillness that read almost like defiance. When the king's gaze swept past her, she did not flinch. She did not drop her eyes on instinct. In a room where everyone was rehearsing submission just to survive the evening, she carried herself like someone who still belonged entirely to herself. For Xerxes, that was intolerable. He had grown completely accustomed to watching people disintegrate under his attention. Simple human dignity, in a woman of all people, registered in his mind as a direct challenge. Desire curdled into fixation almost immediately. He did not simply want her body. He needed to demonstrate that nothing within the borders of his empire existed beyond his grasp. He whispered instructions to a trusted eunuch. He arranged elaborate gifts. He engineered private encounters disguised as family courtesies. She declined every single one. Not gradually. Not with a careful softening that left any opening. She refused him completely and without apology. She was married to his brother. She would not become his hidden arrangement. No treasure, no title, no veiled warning could move her position. In any ordinary court, refusing a powerful man carried serious risk. In the court of a king who claimed to rule under the direct authority of Ahura Mazda, it was nearly equivalent to a death sentence. People had been erased for considerably smaller acts of defiance. But Xerxes hesitated, and the mathematics of the situation were clear even to him. Amestris was not a disposable courtier. He was blood. He was powerful. Humiliating him publicly by seizing his wife could ignite precisely the kind of rebellion that a post-Salamis empire could not survive. The Persian ruling class was already murmuring about weakness. Cracking the last pillar of family loyalty could bring the entire structure down with it. So Xerxes pulled back from the mother, and his attention moved down exactly one generation, to the daughter. Her name was Achaemenid. Younger, less hardened, raised inside a world where a single gesture of royal interest was the most powerful currency in existence. She was Amestris' daughter, and that bloodline made her simultaneously protected and exposed. The same family connections that shielded her father now made her useful to Xerxes in an entirely different way. He moved carefully and slowly. Jewelry first. Fine cloth. Invitations to private gatherings framed as family honors. Every gift arrived carrying additional pressure. Every kind word landed with the full mass of the throne positioned behind it. Under that suffocating weight, with the safety of her entire family balanced against her answer, Artaint became his lover. What began as a grotesque submission to royal obsession hardened over time into a continuing arrangement. For Xerxes it was medicine, a method of feeling dominant again after Greece had stripped that sensation away entirely. For Artaint it was a cage that had been designed to look like a gift. For Macist's wife, the woman who had refused the king and preserved her dignity intact, it was a slow catastrophe unfolding inside her own household. And Queen Amestris observed everything. She occupied the highest position any woman in the empire could hold. Official queen, daughter of Otanes, bound to the king through marriage and the architecture of political power. It would be easy to reduce her to a simple villain. But consider where she actually stood. Her position was simultaneously enormous and precarious. She was surrounded on every side by rivals, concubines building influence, foreign princesses delivered as political arrangements, younger women paraded through court like continuous auditions. If she displayed a single weakness, her sons could lose their standing in the succession entirely. Her survival depended on reading every signal the palace generated. And the palace generated plenty. Servants whispered. Eunuchs traded intelligence in half-finished sentences. Guards tracked who entered which room and at what precise hour. Amestris missed nothing. She noticed unfamiliar jewelry appearing on Artaint. She watched the girls bearing shift in public, a new confidence, a smile that stayed too long, the unmistakable quality of someone who believed she possessed a secret advantage. In a court where a single glance could redistribute power, these were not minor observations. They were evidence. Inside Amestris' mind, a specific narrative took shape and locked into place. She became convinced that Macist's wife, the composed, dignified woman who had always commanded real respect, had deliberately positioned her own daughter in the king's bed. Not from desperation. As a calculated, offensive move. Whether that interpretation was accurate did not matter in the slightest. Once she accepted it, her target was fixed. Meanwhile, Xerxes descended further. During one of his private meetings with Artaint, he made the kind of oath that only a man completely intoxicated by his own authority would ever speak aloud. He swore to give her anything she desired. Anything without qualification or limit. He expected something manageable in return, a country estate, a chest of valuables, a position for her father. Something he could deliver without consequence. He did not expect her to reach for the single object capable of detonating his entire household from the inside. Artaint asked for the robe of Queen Amestris. Not any garment selected from the royal stores. This specific robe, one that Amestris had woven with her own hands. In a world where everything was produced by armies of servants and professional artisans, a garment made personally by the queen carried weight that no purchased item could replicate. It was intimate. It was sacred. It was proof that she was not merely decorative, she was the central woman of the empire, the one whose own hands had shaped something irreplaceable. Xerxes went cold the moment he understood what she was asking. Delivering that robe to his brother's daughter was not simply an insult. It was a precision detonation device aimed at his own marriage. He begged her to choose differently. He offered entire cities. He offered vaults of accumulated wealth. She would not move. She held him to his oath. The King of Kings had given his sacred word. Was he prepared to shatter it over a piece of cloth? In that moment, Xerxes made the choice that reveals exactly what kind of man he was beneath the golden ceremony. He cared more about preserving the performance that his word was unbreakable than he cared about his queen's dignity, his family's stability, or the safety of the woman he claimed to want. He took the robe from Amestris. History does not record the excuse he gave her. The robe left the queen's possession and landed on Artaint's shoulders. The next time the royal court assembled publicly, Amestris saw it. Picture that room. A formal occasion, the empire's elite filling a gilded hall, guards lining every wall. And there among the women stood Artaint, wearing the queen's own hand-woven robe. Not quietly. Not concealed beneath something else. Openly. Visibly. Like a flag driven into conquered ground. Every suspicion Amestris had ever held ignited in that single moment. This was not a misunderstanding. This was war declared in silk. She did not flinch. She did not break. She went completely still. She observed. She memorized. She allowed the moment to pass with perfect composure, giving the court nothing to read from her expression. But behind that stillness, a decision had already been carved permanently into place. Someone was going to answer for this. Not with a quick exile. Not with a clean ending. With something that would make the entire empire remember exactly what it cost to humiliate the queen. From that day forward, Amestris waited for one specific opening. In Persian royal tradition, the king's birthday carried unique and binding force. On that occasion, the king was expected to grant extraordinary favors, and oaths sworn in that context were treated as nearly sacred. Denying a serious request from a figure of standing on the birthday was considered a violation of divine custom. That birthday was the weapon Amestris had selected. She could frame a demand so extreme that Xerxes would find himself trapped between his public identity as a god-appointed sovereign and the monstrous reality of what she was actually requesting. As the day approached, the palace filled with its usual anticipation. Courtiers rehearsed petitions. Governors planned their requests. Xerxes prepared to perform the role he most enjoyed, the magnanimous ruler scattering favors like blessings, a production designed to make everyone temporarily forget the damaged, scandal-surrounded man beneath the regalia. He had no idea that his queen had been counting down to this day for months, sharpening what she intended to ask for until it was fine enough to cut through bone. Before we step through the doors of that banquet hall and watch what Amestris does with her moment, if you've followed this story this far and you want to keep exploring the parts of history that get buried, if you want access to investigations like this one before anyone else sees them, consider subscribing to Crimson Archive and hitting the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. Because what happens in that hall changes everything that follows it. The room filled. Wine moved from jar to cup to lip without stopping. Xerxes took his elevated seat, ready to play the generous sovereign one final time. And then Amestris rose. She smiled. And she asked for something that would drag an innocent woman out of safety and into a nightmare built from blades and blood. The hall went silent. The sacred weight of the birthday oath closed around Xerxes like iron. And with a single word, the King of Kings handed a living human being over to be systematically destroyed. The king's birthday was supposed to be the most celebrated day in the empire. Before sunrise, the palace was already in motion. Servants moved through every corridor carrying silver trays and polished bronze and freshly lit incense. Musicians tested their instruments. Guards inspected their armor and then inspected it again. Everyone understood the ancient obligation attached to this day. Xerxes would hold open court and distribute favors like a deity dispensing grace. Pardons, promotions, land grants and titles. Oaths spoken inside that room on that particular day carried weight that nothing else in the calendar year could match. Reversing a publicly spoken agreement made during the birthday was not merely embarrassing. It was considered close to blasphemy. Xerxes embraced this tradition. It was the single day each year where he could convincingly pretend salamis had never occurred. He could settle into his elevated position and perform generosity and power and adoration all at once while petitioners lined up and knelt before him. The entire event was a choreographed demonstration of royal mercy. But this year, waiting somewhere inside the crowd of hopeful petitioners, there was someone who had not arrived to ask for anything. She had arrived to take something. When the ceremony began, Xerxes appeared in full ceremonial dress. The hall held nobles, military commanders, members of the extended royal family. Roasted meat and heavy perfume and warm wine thickened the air. On a raised platform covered in silk, the king settled into his seat. Amestris stood nearby, projecting unity to everyone watching from the edges of the room. Only a very small number of people present could read what was locked beneath their composed expressions. Petitioners moved forward one at a time. Xerxes dispensed decisions with rehearsed ease. Laughter broke out at regular intervals. Cups were lifted and refilled. But beneath all of that pageantry, something was moving quietly toward the moment that would fracture the dynasty permanently. And then Amestris stepped forward. No raised voice. No visible signal that anything unusual was coming. She approached with exactly the measured control expected of the highest-ranking woman in the Persian Empire. She began by praising Xerxes in front of the assembled court. His wisdom, his strength, his role as protector of the empire. Every phrase sounded like devotion. Every sentence was constructed to read as loyalty. No one watching from the room could have identified what was wrapped inside all that careful language. Then she made her request. Not gold. Not territory. Not any title or jewel or honor. She asked Xerxes to place the wife of Amestris in her hands. The room became stone. Every person there who had heard even a fragment of the rumors circulating through the palace understood immediately what was actually happening. Amestris was claiming the woman she had decided was responsible for her humiliation. She was demanding the mother of the girl who was now openly wearing her robe. Xerxes saw the trap close around him the instant her words landed. Refuse his queen publicly on the birthday and shatter the very tradition that sustained his image of divine generosity. Agree and deliver his own brother's wife directly into the possession of a woman whose fury he himself had manufactured. He paused. Pride made the decision before his mind could properly catch up. He said yes. The word moved through the hall like a tremor moving through deep rock. Servants fixed their eyes on the floor. Nobles stared forward. The men loyal to Amestris were watching, and they understood what had just occurred, and they knew it could not be reversed. This was the king's word, spoken in public, sealed by the sacred weight of the birthday oath. Nothing in the empire was heavier than that. While the celebration continued on the surface, music playing, wine circulating, laughter maintaining its required function, a completely different set of orders was already moving silently through the interior of the palace.